Hello and welcome to the 905er. I am Joel McLeod.
And I'm Roland Tanner.
Before we get started, we'd like to send out a friendly reminder to everyone listening to this podcast that you can support us through Patreon for only $5 per month. For that small fee, you'll be helping us produce this podcast and help us to keep telling you the stories that are important to the 905 region and help us keep going through 2021. That being said, this year has been incredibly difficult. As we come to the end of the year, it's far too easy for us to dwell on the hardships that we've all had to experience, and that has come to signify the year 2020. But while it is easy for us to do that in this time of year, Roland and I want to break the mold. And you know what? We can. It's our podcast. It's our rules. And so we've decided that for the month of December, we are only going to be focusing on good news stories. Those are stories and anecdotes, and not all of them are timely, but something that we hope that will bring a smile to your face and help take your mind off the year that was 2020. So sit back and enjoy. So Roland, why don't you start us off? What do you have for us?
Well, I've got a couple of family stories, I guess, that are they make me smile, and they bring back memories of my childhood and my father's childhood, I guess. Well, not really his childhood, but his young adulthood. And they kind of speak to me, I guess, as to what the Christmas holidays kind of mean, in a very simple and not particularly enlightening way. But, we all kind of create our own holidays in our own families, and these are the stories that got told in my family. So, picture the scene. To go back to the Golden Girls. Sicily, 1920. No, it's actually a town called Slough, which, if you've ever watched the original version of The Office, is where I grew up. It's not a tourist destination anyway. And my dad was just returning from national service at the end of the war in 1945, 1946, something like that. And it was Christmas. Obviously, with the prodigal son coming back, the search was on for a turkey during the rationing that was still very much in place in England at the time. And the way my dad told it, his father was instructed by my grandmother to go out and be sure to find a turkey by hook or by crook, which basically meant the black market, I think is reading between the lines. And my grandfather, being the kind of chap who spent a lot of time in the pub, said, "Don't worry, no problem, there shall be turkey." And then on Christmas Eve, he finally comes back with the promised turkey, and what he's actually got are two emaciated chicken, which are so pathetic that even the cat wouldn't look at them, which led to the expected kind of family domestic. And my dad, in his later life, actually wrote a kind of little biography, and you can tell from this that he's just as pretentious with his words as I am. And he said that my mother was not pleased. She pointed out gently the inadequacy of the poultry. In a towering rage, she indicated that my father's efforts did not meet her desideratum with regard to the fowls of the air, raised for the pleasure of 4 people wishing to adequately celebrate the meaning of the season. My father gulped, saw the error of his ways, and retired to a very quiet corner. And my paternal grandmother was a woman of she was formidable and frankly terrifying, I remember, even when she was much reduced in later years. So the next day, my dad goes into the nearby town of Slough to see what can be found at a butcher's with a few hours to go before Christmas. And the only thing that was still there was a goose, which cost £2, which doesn't sound very much, but £2 was 2 weeks' pay for someone doing national service at the time. So he invested his £2 sterling in this goose, and which really does sort of have the sort of air of Tiny Tim and Ebenezer Scrooge about it. Took home this goose, and only to find that his father had come back from the pub, half cut, 3 sheets to the wind, with an £8 turkey as well. So they ended up having the most well-fed Christmas during the rationing that was quite possible. So that was one of my dad's favourite stories. And he certainly, every future year, tried to get us to replace the turkey with a goose, because so he could sort of revisit that moment. But I'm not sure he ever you ever got lucky.
I always wondered where the tradition of goose for Christmas always came from. For me, it was always a turkey. I've heard about goose, and I've always kind of pictured like Dickensian Industrial Revolution, like the Christmas Carol kind of period of Christmas where goose was, I guess, was much more common. But you don't hear of goose too much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it had already fallen out of favour in England. Obviously, by this time, I think a goose was unusual. But you don't get turkeys in Europe. It's probably as simple as that until turkeys started being imported to Europe and bred on a major scale, goose was the biggest farm animal. Not farm animal, but the biggest bird that you could hope to feed a family on with goose.
See, when I think of goose, I think of memories of going to class at the University of Waterloo. And whenever you'd walk by the Arts Common, there's a good chance you get attacked by a goose trying to protect their nest because they would nest nearby. And the thing is, you'd never see it coming. You'd be walking to class, headphones on, off in your own little world, and all of a sudden you just catch this flapping of wings out of the corner of your eyes. And if you weren't aware, there were stories of people being knocked down and attacked by geese. When I think of geese, that's the first thing that pops into my head.
And you don't realise how big they are until you get really close to one.
Oh no, they're terrifying. But now that I think about it, I'm like, that probably actually would make a really good Christmas meal.
Yeah. Yeah, that was his story. I've got another one if you want from my own childhood, but you can. Do you want to delve into a story of your own first?
I was curious when we started to do this. Initially, kind of generated an idea that we were going to look at, try and find good news stories in the 905. And mostly when you type in news in 905, it's usually about COVID numbers. And we said, nope, not doing that. But I did do a bit of research, and I'm sure there are a few listeners who are familiar with the Hallmark Christmas movie industry. You know, the one Christmas movie about the single woman who's a busy workaholic lawyer / entrepreneur / artist who's just too busy for Christmas spirit and yet finds herself having to move back home to her childhood home to fix her family's diner / bed and breakfast / old homestead / Christmas tree lot. And then along the way, across the path to a single dad / carpenter / soup kitchen volunteer / fill-in generic good deed doer. And then finds the true meaning of Christmas and gives up on her hopes and dreams to move back home and settle down after only meeting this guy for a couple of days. And there's a whole industry on these movies, and I found out that most of them are made here in the 905. Apparently, Newmarket is the backdrop for a large number of these movies, as well as Dundas, Ontario, nearby Hamilton, and that apparently the 905 serves as a great niche Christmas movie backdrop market, which is something I didn't know.
I guess we can bring the snow, and Dundas certainly brings a historical aspect. I'm not familiar with Newmarket. Is it got a kind of like old school downtown?
It does. I mean, Newmarket is I think a really nice community. I've been there a few times. I don't know it intimately as well as I might other places, but from what I do recall, it's a very nice kind of a small town vibe to it. So I can see the setting would make sense there. What I find interesting, though, is that it's just like the go-to. Like, there's an actual industry of Christmas movies that has kind of popped up there, and good for the good people of Newmarket. I mean, if you've got to find a niche market to capitalize on, that's the one to go for.
Absolutely.
But I also found that it's not just Newmarket, and Dundas, but that my news kind of started by discovering that. You know, the Christmas classic, A Christmas Story, which I'm sure all of our listeners are aware of, with Ralphie going for the red carbine action 200-shot range air model rifle with compass in the stock and that thing that tells time. Everybody knows that movie. Everybody loves that movie. But what I don't think people know is that a good chunk of that movie was filmed here in the 905, more specifically in St. Catharines. Victoria Public School in St. Catharines served as the site for all of Ralphie's adventures in the school parts of the film. So immediately everybody should be thinking of the double dog dare of looking at the pole, the aluminum pole covered in ice in the playground, and that scene took place in St. Catharines. Another claim to infamy. Now I believe that the school has been repurposed since then into a women's shelter, which is why I'm not going to go and look for the address necessarily. But, you know, it's one of those things of next time you watch it this season, you know, that's here in the 905.
That's kind of amazing. And I really love that film, and I sort of came to it as probably unusually as an adult because it doesn't exist in Britain. It's not a tradition that exists to watch that particular film. But it was introduced to me when I emigrated, and it really, okay, it sums up something. You know, I think every nation, every continent has its kind of own magic of Christmas, if you like, and those old films really have that. Plus, it's really funny with the. I just remember the kid saying fudge, and it didn't say fudge.
I find it's a funnier movie as I get older because I think part of the charm of the film is like you look back on it through kind of like you look back on like Christmas with rose-colored glasses. It's sad as I get older. I find myself empathizing a lot more with the dad than the kid. I get what he's going through. I get it.
I actually met someone, I'm trying to remember where this was, a couple of years ago, who had that light, you know, the leg with the lampshade on the top. I'm sure someone started making them, but yeah.
It's funny enough, apparently they made them into night lights, and I know this because my brother and sister-in-law, they gave it to us for 1 year as a gag gift for Christmas, and I was like, oh. You open up that box, and it was the exact same reaction in the movie. Like, I don't think there's another reaction to it.
Well, do you have to hit your central heating with a hammer, or is it more reliable than that?
Oh, thank God it's more reliable than that. Good thing that technology has progressed quite a long way since then, thank God.
Yeah. Well, I guess the only other story I really have is from my own childhood when my sister was in what's called the sixth form, which I guess is the last couple of years of high school, when you're doing just before either you leave school or you go to university. And the school she was at it was actually a convent school, and they would have students stay with them, with the nuns from overseas, specifically from Japan. And a friend my sister made was one of the Japanese students who was staying at the convent, and suddenly realised that she was going to be kind of stuck with the nuns for Christmas, which didn't look like a particularly exciting prospect. So my dad, of all people, who was not the most extrovert type, decided to invited this Japanese girl over for Christmas Day, and it was like as someone who was those days sort of pre-internet, pre an awful lot of things, it really was someone's first introduction to a kind of European family's way of life, and certainly from our perspective, I think like a lot of families, Christmas Day is kind of like a very kind of a private thing. It's family and nobody but family. I mean, not everybody's like that, but I don't know. Maybe we were just antisocial. I don't know. So it was kind of weird to have someone come, like have a guest on Christmas Day, and but a Japanese girl called Kimiko visited, and it was just. There's no real punchline to the story. It was just a really, really good day. Kimiko, having good manners, had brought a gift for our family and for the father of the house in particular. And us being rude English people had not thought to get something for her. Which was ridiculous. So my dad, having received something, had to dash upstairs and hopefully she won't listen to this. Probably still thinks it was a specially bought gift. Grabbed a kind of leather-bound copy of, I think it was Winnie the Pooh or something like that. That he had. And gave it to her, which seemed very sweet, and it was completely done in a panic. But despite that, it was a really kind of, I remember it very vividly. It was a great day, and kind of, in those days you didn't meet people from other countries that much. So to have someone from Japan was kind of awesome. I think it was the same in reverse. I'm still in touch through the wonders of Facebook with that person today, and neither of us can believe that we are no longer so young.
Well, that's such is life, I guess. I keep thinking like what this year's Christmas is going to look like. We're still trying to figure out. The reality is we're trying to figure out how we're going to see friends and family. Like for my family, Christmas has turned into quite the hustle and bustle. Usually it's, now it's wake up, kids go down and see what Santa's brought them. Once we open all that up, my wife and I chug back a cup of coffee each. We get changed, showered, get in the car, and we book it down to my in-laws for a Christmas dinner promptly at noon. And we have dinner with her side of the family. And that's, I think actually that's how I met most of her side of the family many years ago. So it's a personal tradition. But that's not going to be the case this year, and I think that's not going to be the case for a lot of families. And it's one of those things that you kind of have to look down and figure out what's most important to all of us. And I think when it comes down to it, like, you kind of realize it's not the Charlie Brown as this might seem. It's not the presents and the trees and the food and everything. It's the fact that this year we're not going to see quite so many faces around the dinner table, or we're going to see a few too many on FaceTime and Skype chats this year. But this is temporary, and it will pass, and we'll be back to it next year, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully this is one of those things that, maybe out of this will come some stories that children in future years will tell. And remember that weird year where we didn't see anybody. Thank goodness we have Zoom. I guess it's so easy to focus on the negative. If this had happened 20 years ago, would have been a different thing,
Absolutely. But, we have the technology kind of make Christmas salvageable. And, I mean, it's just, you have to kind of look for the positives where you can and reach out. And this is a perfect time just to get in touch with somebody that maybe you haven't talked to in a while. See how they're doing. How's their 2020 been? And see how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for many people in our generation, the kind of Christmas card writing routine is not what it used to be.
No.
And it kind of used to force you to do that annual touching base with friends who you maybe don't speak to that often, but who still mean a lot to you. Yeah, maybe this is the year we send some more cards. Or if we don't send cards, send a few extra emails to people we haven't spoken to for a while. And I know probably particularly people who are older, more elderly friends and things like that probably particularly would appreciate that, people reaching out to them.
Well, that's kind of one of the things that we want to do for the month of December is we have a couple of stories, not to give anything away. We have a couple of good news stories that we thought we'd bring to kind of show that people are still doing good things in this year. It's not all bad news. We're going to touch base with a few other stories that we want to share and just kind of personal anecdotes. I personally would love to hear from our listeners any ways that they're going to be changing their Christmas customs and traditions, even if it's just you're going through Zoom or you're going to maybe take an extra walk outside, hopefully during the Christmas holidays, or maybe you're just going to catch up on a number of books that you've been putting off for the year. I'd love to hear it, just because I think
me too.
The one thing that I think we've learned this year is how resilient we are as a people, as a species, and two, we can adapt to just about anything. When we put our mind to it, I think for the most part we are good, compassionate people. I remember when this thing first started, everybody thought, oh my God, it's going to be the end of civilization. We're all going to descend into anarchy and start roaming the streets. And yeah, that didn't happen. We came together. The idea of just wear a mask and look after each other kind of became the mantra of 2020. And I'm curious to see how that spirit kind of carries on into the holiday season to make this one a more unique Christmas.
Yeah, let's try and do it. The longer it goes on, the tougher it is to have that kind of, again, sorry, here's my British heritage coming out again, but that kind of Dunkirk spirit, as it gets called over there, it gets tougher, but it's there because we choose for it to be there. And I don't know, I have another completely dumb story, nothing to do with Christmas. But it's an author whose name I can't remember, famous author of the 1940s or something like that. And he decided at some point in his life that he couldn't be bothered walking to the letterbox to do his letters. So he would every day open his window and throw the letters out of the window onto the sidewalk. And in the next 40 years of his life or whatever, a letter was never not delivered because someone would always walk by, pick it up, notice it, and put it in the letterbox for him. And that says something pretty good. I don't know. I think, that's when I'm feeling crappy, that's the story I go for.
Well, it's a good one. I'll give you that. Well, I think that's going to be it for this week. We're not going to take up too much of your time, folks. But, we hope that you look out for each other in the month ahead. Help out where you can and let us know how you're doing and maybe, what you're doing at home and what stories you're focusing on to get you through the season.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.